Congressman Dan Crenshaw of Texas. Good morning, Congressman.
Hey, you. Yeah, how you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I just finished talking to Secretary Pompeo, and before we go to the insurrection in the Capitol last week, I just want to bring to your attention that the Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece, Global Times, threatened yesterday that, quote, we would rather face a Taiwan Straits crisis, even a storm in the next 10 days if Pompeo and his likes become more aggressive and provocative before leaving office, close quote. Last year, an impeachment obscured a China crisis, the virus descent on America. Are you aware of this? Do people on the Hill know what China is threatening?
No, I mean, I think some of us are aware, of course, but to your broader point, I think, is when you're engaging in the kind of theatrics that we are often engaging in here and at each other's throats, you tend to ignore the real threats to the country. And that seems to be exactly what's happening. The Chinese are always going to use division here and turmoil here to further their agenda. And I think that's exactly what we could expect. And frankly, I'm glad we have responsible adults like Mike Pompeo that are paying attention.
So do you expect that we would respond in like kind to any provocation from China, Congressman, so that if there is a shouldering incident, for example, ship to ship, that we will not retreat from that?
Look, I'd like to think so. I mean, I don't really like to deal in hypotheticals on this one, Hugh, but I would imagine so. But I'm not exactly sure what we could expect right now.
All right, let's go backwards. You were very clear about the attack on the Capitol as it was occurring, as was, I noted at the time, Michael Gallagher, Michael Waltz, and Senator Cotton. The three representatives in the Senate are all veterans of Iraq and or Afghanistan, and I noted at the time you guys had quick clarity as to the fact an insurrectionist mob using violence was attempting to obstruct the work of the Congress. Ought we to have seen that coming?
Well, you should always be prepared for it. I mean, there's definitely going to be an after-action report on the Capitol Police side on just simple planning and contingency planning. You know, I think it's pretty clear to me that your average police officer on the ground did not have in his or her head the series of escalations that would occur, you know, the points where you might hold the line. It doesn't seem like they knew any of those answers. And so they were sort of making it up as they went. You know, they weren't sure, should we confront these people at the door? Should we let them in? We usually let Americans in the Capitol on tours and things. So is that what we're supposed to do now? They didn't know. And in many cases, it's a few of them versus thousands of people. And that guidance was just not given to them. So that's a real problem. And there's really no excuse for not being prepared. But I suppose that they would probably imagine that this would look a lot like the Million MAGA March. A lot of the same people are there, and they shouldn't have thought that because this particular demonstration had a very specific target, and so they should have known better. But yeah, at the higher leadership levels, there's going to be a real conversation about how to plan for these things.
If militias assemble, and there's legitimate grave concerns about militias in state capitals and extreme right-wingers attacking state capitals, should preemptive action be taken, Congressman Crenshaw, now or as they are tracked into those state capitals next week?
Well, I'm not sure what preemptive act. You have to accuse somebody of a crime. As far as preparation goes, to defend capitals and implement security around them, I'm not sure if that's what you meant, but that would be an obvious yes. But as far as actually arresting people ahead of time, well, you're going to have to prove that they're engaging in some kind of conspiracy and coordinating a violent attack, which is probably a high bar, but I bet a lot of people might be doing that. And so, again, we shouldn't change our current justice system of due process for anything, but we definitely should be vigilant.
Will you be voting to impeach the president tomorrow, Congressman?
No, I don't. Look, I think this raises the temperature in another escalatory fashion, and that's exactly the opposite of what we need to be doing. We should be taking steps to lower the temperature, and one side has to start that process. I've never seen the Democrats start that process, but this would be a good time to do so. It feels vindictive. It feels rushed. There's no hearings. There's no evidence being presented. It doesn't appear to me that they really take it seriously. It appears to be a political vindictive move. It's not to say that the president doesn't deserve to be rebuked. It doesn't bear some responsibility for what happens, but there's a difference between moral responsibility and legal responsibility. And it got to put this into context. He's going to leave office in approximately 10 days.
Well, I sort of view it, Congressman, as performance art politics, which is allowing justified anger on the part of members who were threatened, I mean, really threatened, to disfigure a constitutional process that in the House ought always to require the collection of and debate over evidence, and in the Senate a trial that becomes unconstitutional the moment after President Trump leaves office in the eyes of some scholars. That's disputed, but in the eyes of some scholars. Does anyone in the caucus not understand? This is a precedent. It'll be a sword in the future for people.
Yeah, and I do understand the precedent argument. Impeachment, I mean, just by the letter of the law, can be as frivolous as you want it to be. It is indeed a political process. I think precedents are being thrown out the window left and right these days. But again, I just think that there's two reasons here. One is simply lower the temperature. The second is, if you're going to accuse somebody of incitement of violence, that's a very hard legal standard to prove. There's no way it could be proven in the court of law in this particular case. And, barring that, and then again, the fact that we've only got 10 days left, and the priority that we need to be engaging in is unifying the country, not escalating things further. These are all pretty good reasons, I think, to not vote for impeachment. Again, I don't want to say that he's blameless for this. I think there's a few members as well that, leading up to January 6th, just hyped up the rhetoric in such a heated way, called for fighting at the Capitol, called for fighting against those traitors and cowards that wanted to protect the Constitution. That they have to bear some responsibility. But I also don't think that anybody in their minds, in the movies that they were playing in their minds, had a siege on the Capitol being imagined. I bet a lot of the people who were marching to the Capitol had no intention of seizing the Capitol until they did.
Until they did,
sort of typical of typical of a frenzy of mob mentality.
You've been quoted saying it was all fun and games to some members. They never knew what a real fight was. Real fights are scary. Bullets flying, that's scary. Glass breaking, that's really scary. They've been talking about the courage to stand up to this, but when it came down to it, there was no courage. Now, Todd Young prepared to defend Senators Murkowski and Collins, so there were some incidents of real courage on the Capitol among the members on both sides. I just wonder, have you talked to any of your colleagues on the Republican side who have been the most irresponsible in their rhetoric?
Not directly. I tried to talk them out of it weeks ago. But I have not even looked at them, not even confronted some of them, because I don't want to say anything I'll regret. But they know who they are. And there has to be some kind of sense of responsibility for what's happened here.
Do you think they ought to be primaried?
I don't want to play the primary everybody game. I'm not sure what needs to be. It's not clear to me what the consequences are.
In the next cycle,
the first step is acknowledging it.
Yeah. Last question. In the next cycle, I want serious people, veterans of the war primarily, people under 40, people who are smart about the world to run. You have some young colleagues who are just not very experienced in the world. We got to sort of shed these marginal figures. Is anyone going to stand up and speak to this on behalf of the Republican Party, that these are serious times? We can't have unserious people.
We have a lot of unserious people. Look, I wish it was as easy as that. Ironically, what you hear from the base often is, the establishment this and that, and these fringe characters that you're talking about. They love to talk about coming to Washington and fighting the establishment. Well, they don't know what that means. It doesn't really mean anything. The real problem is that there is no establishment. It's this myth. There isn't some stronghold of leadership over members just telling them what to do. This is a myth that gets perpetuated in Republican talking circles. And it's just not true. What you actually do need, to your point, is a strong leadership that can push some of these fringe characters out because they're not experienced, they're not educated, and they engage in outrage culture.
Well said, Congressman.